It's time for the District 4 Report, presented to you by Professor Diggs himself, only on PilePointBearcats.com. Class begins now.
Produced from our studios in Pilot Point, delivered to you all over the Metroplex, specifically the western part of the Metroplex. It is the District 4 3A Report. I am the Professor Matt Diggs, and thank you for tuning in for another week. And it's a week where we have a lot more clarity because we know exactly what's going on. We know exactly what's up for grabs this week, and we will look at all of that. But as always, we want to look ahead and then look behind and figure out where we were going and if we were right or wrong, and then how that relates to the future. And last week we had 4 big games, and the biggest game was Whitesboro and Paradise. I took Whitesboro to win by a score, and they gave us exactly that. They won by a score. So congratulations to Whitesboro. All 4 playoff positions are not locked in, as we're going to find out, but we do have all 4 positions clinched. Then we had Bowie versus Ponder. I had Ponder winning by 7, but Ponder had its best game of the season, winning by 49. So congratulations to Ponder for that big win. And we'll talk more about some of the statistics in that big win coming up next. Boyd versus Pilot Point. I had Pilot Point having a big victory, kind of getting ready for that Brock game on a high. And although it wasn't a beauty contest, they only won the game by 28. So a little bit of questions as far as that goes. And then Brock versus Peaster. I thought Brock would win. I thought they'd win convincingly, but I didn't realize how convincingly they would win. I had Brock winning by 27, and they ended up winning by 74. That's right, 74. And as we'll talk about, they had scored all 80 points by the end of the third quarter. So statement has been made over there for Brock. We talk about the Brock versus Jim Ned game. Again, I can't say that for sure that Brock is paying attention to this and playing things up, but I think the preponderance of the evidence might indicate that they had something to prove, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and they certainly proved something this past week. And when we look at that game in a little more detail, I think the dominance, Tyler Moody just almost had a perfect night. He had 11 for 12 for 239 yards, threw for 6 touchdowns. So pretty much he threw the ball 12 times, 6 touchdowns, incredibly efficient. Just about every other pass resulted in a touchdown. And Nathan Jones had a monster night, 4 receptions for 118 yards. 3 of those went for touchdowns. Eli Potts, 3 for 56. 2 of those went for touchdowns. And Cutter Wilson had a great night, 18 carries for 197 yards, and 3 of those went for touchdowns. They only had 47 plays, but 616 yards. Just an incredibly efficient night. They won the turnover battle 2-0, just completely played a perfect game. And as noted, it was 68-0 at halftime. 80-0 going into the fourth quarter. Just absolute dominance. Brock had something to prove, and prove it they did, beating Peaster. The digital scout thing that I'm using has it as 80-7. I've seen it as 80-6. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, but we pride ourselves on accuracy and efficiency here at the District 4 3A Report. So we'll do a little bit of research and find out, was it 80-6 or 80-7? Pilot Point versus Boyd, and what can you say about Aiden Cox? I mean, just an absolutely monster night again. Ever since we've been doing the District 4 3A Report, Aiden Cox has been player of the game, player of the night, and this is on the team with Ish Harris. I mean, the Texas A&M recruit. So we're talking about somebody who is stepping up and making his name for himself. 11 catches, 310 yards, 4 touchdowns for Aiden Cox, obviously the star of the game. And you got to have somebody throwing it to him, and Wyatt Smith, again, 16 carries, or 16 for 22, 353 yards. Did have an interception, but did throw for 5 touchdowns. The running game wasn't as much of a factor. Boyd kind of shut that down all night. 31 carries for 81 yards. So not the kind of offensive, the rushing performance you would expect, but with those kind of passing numbers, obviously able to make up for it. For me to see Pilot Point with a chance against Brock this week, that running number, the rushing numbers, got to get better. Got to be more efficient. Got to average more than 3 yards a carry against a team like Brock. We saw Brock averaging over 10 yards a carry against Peaster, and when you have that kind of efficiency, that makes the passing game that much better. If Brock's able to slow down Pilot Point with just their front three, front four, that's going to make it harder for Wyatt Smith to find Aiden Cox and Colin Lynch and Cade Carter and some of those receivers for big plays, because they can double and triple Aiden Cox while still getting to that rushing game. So that'll be kind of the interesting matchup that we're going to be looking at this week. Paradise versus Whitesboro, the game of the week, was exactly what you would expected. And when you saw Paradise all year, they were very competitive in all their games. They scored a lot of sevens in throughout the season, but just defensively couldn't get the stops when they were needed. Whitesboro with a monster second quarter to go up 21-14, and they just traded touchdowns for the rest of the game, ending up in that 35-28 win. And it was a very efficient night for Mac Harper. He didn't have to have a big passing game. 8 for 14, 105 yards with a touchdown. And it was really rushing, no real big numbers stepping out. He rushed for 12 carries for 60 yards. Asher Contreras, the main running back, 12 carries for 85 yards. And it was some of the other players who scored the touchdowns. Jacob Smith, 2 touchdowns, 6 carries for 46 yards as well. And then on the receiving side of the ball, you had Sean Scherz, 2 receptions for 47 yards. But really, defensively, the number that steps out for you is Jay Sanders. Jay Sanders with 2 interceptions, and that was a big factor in winning that turnover battle, while Whitesboro was able to get the victory, which kind of sets up the big games this week. You're going to have Paradise against, or you're going to have Whitesboro versus Peaster, and Pilot Point versus Brock, 1 versus 2, 3 versus 4. But Ponder with its best game of the year to end the District 4-3A kind of retrospect. Clifton Cooper had his best day, and he's coming back next year. He's only a junior. 20 for 29, 349 yards and 6 touchdowns. We always talk about Aiden Cox, but Case Peacock, we've mentioned his name a few times. He's only a sophomore, and he's going to be back next year. 12 receptions, 258 yards, and 4 touchdowns for Ponder. They jumped out on him early. They jumped out on Bowie early and just drove them into the mat. It was 32-0 at halftime, 32-6 at halftime. My apologies. I don't want to we don't want to give Bowie a incomplete representation. But then it was 48-6 at the end of the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter came in. A lot of backups playing. 61-12. Ponder with a nice win over Bowie this week. So Ponder's got a little bit of momentum heading into the off season, and I think that's important. I've found typically when a team wins its last game, even if they don't make the playoffs, it does give them a little bit of momentum. And the Paradise Ponder game for 5th and 6th place, I think will really indicate the direction of that, because Paradise should be a favorite in that game, but Ponder had its best game, so can they capitalize on that? I think that game's going to be a lot closer than some of the computer polls might project. I will be taking Paradise in that game, but I think it'll be a 1-score game. But I think Paradise will finally capture that 1-score win, because they've had a lot of 1-score losses, as we've talked about. And then Boyd versus Bowie for 7th and 8th place. I think Boyd should have a field day and take care of business in that game as well. Pilot Point versus Brock. We've talked about the kinds of things that need to happen with Pilot Point. They got to be more efficient running the game because the way to keep Brock's offense slowed down is to keep him off the field. And if Pilot Point can't do that with the running game, then I think you could see Brock take this game out of hand. And obviously they're a team with a lot to prove, and they're looking to make a statement. And they've got a chip on their shoulder. There have been some in the media, including myself, that said Brock is not as good this year as they've been in the past. And I think that's really fueled Brock and Coach Mathis and that crew saying, hey, we're as good as we've ever been, if not better. And they're really using this regular season to create that resume. Obviously, Pilot Point has been up and down. They've won 6 in district, but a very shaky start. So Pilot Point's got a lot to prove as well. So this game is going to be very interesting. For me, if Pilot Point stays within 3 touchdowns of Brock, I think that's a win. And obviously, Brock is going to be looking to make a statement like they did against Peaster. Peaster-Whitesboro, I think is going to be a very fun game. How does Peaster respond? Peaster was 7-1 going into this game, and obviously losing 80-6 or 80-7 was not quite what they were expecting. I think they expected to play a lot more competitively with Brock, even for a half. But as we talked about, it wasn't competitive at any point in this game. By the end of the first quarter, it was pretty much over. So how does Peaster respond? How does Coach McElroy get that squad back up? And then Whitesboro, Coach Fagan, continuing to play at the high level. Can they win this third place game? Because as we'll allude to when we start talking about what is going to happen in the playoffs, avoiding Jim Ned in the first round has your best chance for a playoff victory. So big game. I know coaches don't like to phrase it as avoiding a certain team. You know, they'll take whoever's on the schedule. But we can say in the media, in the prognostication, you want to avoid Jim Ned in the first round. The difference between third and fourth is probably the difference between a 1 or 2 round playoff game or a quick exit in the playoffs. So we will find out what happens this week. And as part of my commitment to you, the District 4 3A report listener, I'm going to make that drive up 377 this week. I'm going to go drop in at Pilot Point versus Brock. I'm not going to watch the game, although our friends at Sideline to Sideline, Grant and Terry, they do great stuff. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably know who Grant and Terry are and the great work they do on Sideline to Sideline. We'll let them cover that game. I'm more interested in Peaster versus Whitesboro. Third versus fourth, I think it'll be a more competitive game. So I'm excited to see that game, and I'll see it in person. But I'm going to go stop by Pilot Point on the way over there. I would have stopped by Tioga as well and saw our friend Coach Rogers, but they're playing an Alvord this week. So my 377 tour of the teams will not be fully complete, but we'll see some of the big names this week. And then afterward, I will be headed down to Bobby V's in Arlington for a live edition of The Dump. If you're not familiar with The Dump, it is what I do on Friday nights where I break down everything. Hopefully we'll have some coin flips being decided over there at Bobby V's. If you're out in the Arlington area coming home from Brock, heading down to I-20, it's I-20 in Bowen, come on in and say hello. And we'll be happy to see everybody. You can have a beer or a nice quenching water, whatever is your modus operandi, but we'll be there at Bobby V's this Friday night after the Whitesboro Peaster game to break down everything across the DFW Metroplex. So obviously we want to look ahead, and I've got a couple of things. We want to look at the whole region as a whole because we are getting to that point. District 1 3A, you've got Shallow Water in, you've got Denver City in. Slayton and Brownfield are likely to make it, but there is a possibility that Will Mesa can beat Brownfield and cause a 3-way tie with those 3 teams at 2 and 3, and then that will go to points. So we will find out what happens Friday night with that, if La Mesa can get into the playoffs, or if Slayton and Brownfield will take care of business. In District 2 3A, I've got all 4 playoff teams as in. You've got Bushland, Muleshoe, Amarillo, River Road, and Dalhart. Amarillo, River Road, and Dalhart will play this week for 3rd and 4th place. As far as seeding goes, the way I've got the math, Muleshoe and Littlefield. If Littlefield beats Muleshoe, Littlefield's already lost to Dalhart River Road, so that makes that game pointless. Littlefield can't cause a tie with Muleshoe, so Muleshoe is locked in at the second seed, and then you have Bushland locked in as the first seed. They're 4-0, they're done. They've got the bye week this week, so they'll be out watching somebody, probably getting ready for playoffs. Maybe, as we'll see, they might be at Pilot Point and Brock this week, as we'll talk about in the bracketology. That Bushland may be playing, or they may be at Whitesboro and Pisgah to check out the bracketology of that. That is what we would project their second round game would end up looking like. Jim Ned, Wall, Early, and Breckenridge. I have all four of those teams as in. It can get a little crazy, though, and this is certainly not official. I've looked at the San Angelo papers and haven't seen any definitive answers on this. In fact, the San Angelo paper had currently they don't have Early as even clinching the playoffs, but as much as I can see it, even if Clyde somehow beat Jim Ned, Clyde has lost to any team that can be that they can tie with. So I've got the four teams as Jim Ned, Wall, Early, and Breckenridge. But the San Angelo paper, which is obviously closer to the situation, they have Early not clinching quite yet. But I have them as clinching. But what I don't have is the seeding. So if Wall beats Early this week, it's pretty much locked down. Everything is easy. We'll have had a clean district, as we've talked about. Jim Ned would be 1, Wall would be 2, Breckenridge would be 3, and Early would be your 4th seed. Now, if Early manages to beat Wall, and obviously Early 7-2, a very good team. They've already lost to Breckenridge this year, but a team that can certainly beat Wall. The way I have the points, you have Breckenridge already beat Early by 17. Wall beat Breckenridge by 3. So to me, and I don't know how their final points, if they cap at 14 or if they cap at 17 or higher, but pretty much Breckenridge is locked into a near max scenario. So if Early beats Wall, I've got Breckenridge getting that second seed, and then depending on how much Early beats Wall, Early could get up to that third seed, but if Early doesn't beat Wall by enough, then they would end up at that 4th seed anyways. So if Early beats Wall by 10 or so, then I would have Early as the 3rd seed, Wall as the 4th seed. But if it's a close game, one possession game, then Wall would be that 3rd seed, and Early would still be the 4th seed, even though Early beat Wall. But Breckenridge, that would bump Breckenridge into the number 2 seed, which gets them a home game, as we will talk about coming up. So when I look at the region, I rank the teams this week, and we are playing the Brock versus Jim Ned game, so I'm not going to give a 1 or 2 quite yet, because I've been pitting Jim Ned and Brock against each other all year to see which team impresses me the most. And so far through 10 weeks, Brock has impressed me the most 5 times, and Jim Ned has impressed me the most 5 times. So it's coming down to this week to determine which team impresses me more, and that will be my number 1 seed, and the loser will be the number 2 seed as far as that goes. Right now, I'm looking for Pilot Point to impress me as well. I've got Bushland as my 3rd seed in the district rankings, in the regional rankings. I've got Pilot Point as my 4 seed. If Pilot Point can stay within 21 points of Brock, I will flip that over, and I would have Pilot Point as my 3rd seed and Bushland as my 4th seed. I've got Shallow Water 5th. I've got Wall 6th, Whitesboro 7th, Breckenridge 8th. Early 9th, Pisgah number 10, Denver City 11, Muleshoe number 12, Amarillo River Road 13, Dalhart 14. And no matter what 2 teams come in from District 1-3A or 1-3A, whoever's the 3rd place team, I'll have as the 15th ranked team, and whoever's the 4th place team, I'll have as the 16th ranked team. So if the playoffs started today with this kind of setup, here's how the bracketology would look. Starting at the top of the brackets, I have Shallow Water playing Dalhart. and I have Pilot Point playing Breckenridge because I think Wall will beat early, so I'll have Breckenridge at number 3. But that Pilot Point Breckenridge game would be a fantastic football game, very competitive game. I think Pilot Point might actually prefer to play an early or a Wall, so they might be looking at that game, hoping for a different outcome to avoid a very hot Breckenridge. Then a little bit down the district, down the bracket, you've got Bushland and Brownfield. That's my projection. Whitesboro against Jim Ned, I should say Wall versus Whitesboro. I just completely misread my bracketology. So there's people like, probably freaking out. So again, Bushland and Brownfield, Wall versus Whitesboro to end the top half of that bracket. Then on the bottom half of the bracket, I've got Jim Ned versus Peaster, Muleshoe versus Slayton. Then I have Brock versus Early and Denver City versus Amarillo River Road. So if you look at my projections and kind of how I ranked the teams, I would have the second round today looking at Shallow Water versus Pilot Point and Bushland versus Wall. I would have Wall as a slight favorite over Whitesboro, and that's why you might see the Bushland scouting out Wall versus Early, or maybe they might be coming to that Whitesboro versus Peaster game. I have Jim Ned versus Muleshoe and Brock versus Denver City as the other games in the bottom half. And then if all holds well, I've got Pilot Point versus Bushland and Jim Ned versus Brock. And as I've talked about, I'm looking to see how that Pilot Point versus Brock game manages and who I would have as my 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And that's who I think will be playing in the regional semifinals. And then this week will help me answer the question for next week, and we'll bring that to you in the District 4 3A report. Do I have Jim Ned ranked higher, or do I have Brock ranked higher in Pilot Point versus Bushland? Where do I have them ranked? This week, things, if you can go on to the Old Coach and check out my final point spreads on Thursday morning, but I'm going to be taking Brock over Pilot Point. I'm going to be taking Whitesboro over Peaster. I'm going to be taking Paradise over Ponder, and I'm going to be taking Boyd over Bowie this week. You got 1 versus 2, 3 versus 4, 5 versus 6, 7 versus 8, and we will be saying goodbye this week to Paradise, Ponder, Boyd, and Bowie. Thank you for being part of the District 4 3A report. We'll see how you manage if we have this district again next year, but it's so hard to say goodbye. And Paradise, Ponder, Boyd, and Bowie, hope you have great basketball seasons. But after this week, we will not be talking about you other than the post-mortem to start out the episode next week. We will be only focusing on Brock, Pilot Point, Peaster, and Whitesboro as they are our playoff teams, and they will be playing the District 3 3A teams. And I think that we could see 3 out of 4 teams in 4 3A advancing over 3 of the 4 teams in 3 3A, with Jim Ned being the only team that I would project at this point, potentially. I guess I already picked Wall, or I already picked Whitesboro to lose this week, so we'll see. But I think that Whitesboro, that's what I'm going to go see, though. I'm going to see if they can compete with a team like Wall in the first round of the playoffs. But I very well could be seeing 3 of the teams going to the next round of the playoffs. And we'll definitely be cheering for the District 4 3A teams to continue as far on, because this show, as long as we have 1 team in the playoffs, we will have the District 4 3A report. But it'll be more regional based after this. So thank you for tuning in to yet another groundbreaking District 4 3A report. A little bit of a longer 4 3A report. I know our friends in Pilot Point, they're queuing me out. So hit the music, Pilot Point, and we will see you next week on the District 4 3A report.